Hello and welcome to FILMFEST München and our panel discussion called Munich, the Edge of War, where we will be seeing the first sneak peeks of Munich, the new Netflix film that will come out. We're all very excited to share those clips with you. And here on stage are, on the very left from my side, Christoph Gröner, the artistic director of FILMFEST München, and next to him, the director of Munich, Christian Schwochow. Everyone will know him, of course, in the audience, and Sasha Bühler, the director international original film at Netflix. And we have one digital panelist as well, Andrew Eaton, the producer of the film. And we can already see him. Hi, Andrew. Can you hear us? Fantastic.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Thanks for joining us digitally. But before we start and talk too much about everything, I think we should just see something, right?
Let's start the first clip and get the first impression of Munich. Wow. Christian, congratulations. You just were moving around the stage and saying like, I want to see this as well, but the stage is high up, so I just kept you here. But was it the first time for you seeing it on the big screen as well now, or how big was the big screen you saw it on before in post-production?
I guess it was a bit smaller, but of course I'm currently in the sound mix, and so I'm very happy to see the film on a big screen every day. But of course, this is way bigger.
Well, I didn't mean it exactly that way. It was just, this scene is very important to you. This is what I was aiming at. This is the beginning of the film. It's like combining all the themes. It's like an overture, you could say, with Jannis Niewöhner and, of course, Liv Lise Vries and George McKay. So combining an international cast. It's a complete change, one could say, from the Robert Harris novel, in that it really boils down this to the essence of youth.
Yeah. When you read the novel from Robert Harris, it's a very well researched 400, 500 page long, very grown up book about the year 38 and the Munich conference. And when I read the novel, I had a feeling, and well, everybody kind of shared that we have to make it accessible to a younger audience. And the two main protagonists are very grown up in the book, and we felt we need to add in a layer to make the story actually appear more fresh, and to kind of, you know, Robert Harris is has had a long career, so he's I think he's over 70 now, and we felt you know, we can boost the story a bit up. And when we cast Jannis, George, and Liv, we met for rehearsals in Berlin a couple of months before we started shooting, and we would start going into a room and starting to improvise, and the energy that came up, I felt we need to bring into this film. So we kind of, even though there's not many scenes in the year 32, like this Oxford sequence, they bring a very, very special spirit about this lost generation into the film.
Andrew, Sasha, this is one of Robert Harris' most recent novels, one of his most sought after, one of his biggest, just recently, 2017. So let's talk about the hunt for the rights, the conviction to bring this to the big to the screen, to make this into a big movie. Please tell us about.
It's actually a pretty good story. My boss is David Kasi, and he runs the film initiative for Netflix for all of EMEA, so Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And when he started in early 2019, he was, you know, going out spreading the word of what we're trying to do, and that is we wanted to find local stories with real global potential. Netflix had been producing already, out of Germany, for example, Issy and Ossie, Kidnapping Stella, and those films worked very well for us, and they did travel outside of Germany, but they were intended mainly for a local audience, and we were specifically targeting local stories that really, really have an international appeal as well. Netflix recognized the power of European talent, that language doesn't matter that much anymore, as we've seen through our series, and wanted to invest in this market and grow it, the growth potential that they saw. So, you know, David told the story of what he wanted to do to this agent he was meeting with in London, and he got up to leave the meeting and looked down on the table, and there was the book Munich. And he had read it himself a couple of years before when it came out and loved it, and just sort of went, ping, that's exactly what we're looking for. It's got, you know, it's a great story. It's a strong IP based on Robert Harris's international best-selling novel, and it's truly international. And so he just said, what about that? And he said, actually, the rights have just reverted back to us. And he took them. And then David brought in Andrew Eaton as the producer. My colleague, Teresa Maneo, brought in the wonderful Ben Power to write the script. And then I joined Netflix end of 2019, and we made a short list of directors. Christian was obviously on it. He flew over to London, we had dinner, and that was that. It was really clear that he was incredibly passionate about it, and he was the right one for the job, so we were thrilled. And that's how it happened.
And maybe, Andrew, you want to comment on that as well. And then also, Sasha, you already mentioned one important name, Ben Power, when he got on board, a young British playwright and the screenwriter of the movie. Andrew, maybe you can also comment on that, why you actually picked Ben Power as well as the screenwriter.
Sure. Well, I think I should say in Robert Harris's defense, he's only 64, Christian, even though you keep making him older. But I think it was really true. I think two of the things that were most exciting for me when I came on board was one was the David Kossi's desire and Netflix's desire to have a German director. That was essential. And I think then Christian's desire to make it accessible to a younger audience. And Ben was very much a part of that. I mean, Ben is much younger than all of us and is a really successful playwright, as you said, and hadn't really done a lot of screenwriting. He did a few things for television, but he was definitely up and coming. And actually, David Kossi knew him as well through his theatre connections. And Ben just seemed like a fresh eye on the subject who would bring that youthfulness and energy, and that's certainly what he did.
And then maybe let's elaborate a little more about that, because Christian, you have already mentioned that as well, that you wanted to focus on the younger generation and the younger voices. And was that something that you decided all together from the very start, that this would be the perspective that you wanted to portray in the film?
Well, also in Robert Harris' book, the two characters played by Jannis and George are the main protagonists. But I think we had very early discussions that their friendship and their aim to attack and to try and change history should be the spine of the story. And it always was. I mean, of course, we had different drafts and actually quite short development process. I think when we met first, that was March or end of February last year, and we didn't even have a script, and we started shooting in October. But yeah, I think we were very clear about it, that those two have to be the heart of the story. That was not something we had to discuss. Of course, if you bring in an actor like Jeremy Irons, who plays Neville Chamberlain, the British Prime Minister, you do have discussion, how big does he need to be? And we did have drafts where, you know, the older characters of the story got more space, but we would always realize the two boys, they are the heart of the story.
Absolutely. I think that's probably the perfect timing to look at the second clip, right? So the second clip, please.
Now, from the first to the second scene, we obviously see the first scene symbolizes communication of idealism, of different values that can still freely communicate, freely provoke themselves. This in the second scene has already turned to chauvinism and of course to fascism and the sympathy for fascism. So I mean, again, to connect this to youth is obviously a connection to a youth audience and to the now. How does it connect to the now? This is a question to all of you, to developments we have in Europe, with the Brexit, all on the globe. I mean, it's about time, you know, to talk about suggestion that leads to fascism and attraction and how to fight against it and everything so on. And we will talk about that a bit more, about your recent films, because this forms a real melody in your recent work, I would say. But this is to all three of you, the question.
Go ahead. Christian's very passionate about this.
Yeah, I guess you already gave parts of the answer. I mean, when Ende and I spoke first, the first topic that came up was Brexit, obviously, and the European continent that is kind of falling apart right now, and how we could, how this story resonates with Europe or the world of today. And I think the issues being discussed in the film, like what do you do when your country is governed by anti-democrats, by dictators. I mean, this is very, you know, it's politics of today, and they become more and more urgent. Like, what do you do? What do we do as a European Union with a man like Putin or like Viktor Orban? And you know, there's so many more. And I guess what we try to do is raise this discussion through this period drama, because you watch the guys and there are more scenes like that, and you feel like this is at least what I've tried to achieve. This is not a discussion of the year 1932 or 38, the two time slots that are being portrayed within the story. We wanted we wanted a film that discusses the issues of modern politics of today. Andrew, was that a correct summary of our early discussions?
A very correct summary. I think it was remarkable when we were shooting those scenes. You could feel around the crew, because we had a lot of very young crew working with us, that you could, as Christian says, you could swap the name of Hitler for 5 or 6 other names, you know, in our contemporary world, and the conversations would make exactly the same sense. And that was both scary, but also, I think, quite exciting to feel that we were having that debate now. And before we started filming, Christian got together all of the younger members of the crew, like all the ones under the age of 30, I would say. And it was interesting to hear that point of view, that none of them had ever heard of Neville Chamberlain, for example. So that combination of looking back and also looking at the present, and indeed, hopefully looking forward. I don't think when we started the journey, we expected it to be quite so rich, but I really hope that we capture that in the film.
And I would actually add to that. I think today's youth is happily becoming much more political and much more active after a period of some apathy, I would say. And you look at, you know, the whole environmental movement of the Fridays for Future, kids out on the street, Black Lives Matter, and how these things have really, how the youth has really led the charge with them. And I think that's incredibly exciting to have these young, you know, to tell this story of this historical, very important event through the eyes of these passionate young men trying to build a better future in their own ways.
Maybe before we started talking a little more about the production side of things as well, I would like to ask is like, because you had or still have a very international team. So did like the opinions or the approaches sort of like, were they divided, or were they all like sort of having the same opinion on things and the same view, even the younger ones? Or was there even like sort of like a bit of a debate or a discussion going on when you sort of live in the UK right now, where Brexit actually is just happening, or you live in Germany where we are maybe in a different state? Was that something that sort of like also played a role in like the production?
Well, this is kind of absurd. I mean, the crew was German, British, and we would, agree very much on the same issues, and everybody in my crew from the UK is desperate about the Brexit. I haven't heard a single voice, for Brexit, and I guess what Andrew just mentioned, it's something that I started doing a few years ago with every project that I do, that I gather the crew members under 30, ask them to read the script if they're a driver or in whatever department they work in, to find out what speaks to them through the script, or does it appeal to them or not. And it's always very, very helpful to do that. And sometimes it's as simple as that, and that was the same with a German or British crew. They all feel after reading the script, it's a story that encourages us to actually do something. No matter what you do, just don't stay at home and feel overwhelmed by world politics. And that's exactly what Sasha said. It's a new generation, and which makes me kind of hopeful. And I think we try to make a film, or I'm trying to make films that give them actually encouragement to go out and do something, or at least start discussing. This is a film that discusses a lot violence versus traditional politics, and yeah, that was a very exciting experience with. Especially for me with the British crew, some of them I knew already from The Crown. I mean, every day in the UK, when you speak to people, you speak about politics because the country is in such a mess. But it's a good thing, because sometimes I feel here we are a bit too tired when it comes to certain issues.
Absolutely. Would you like to comment on that?
No, playing to the internationality from another way is, of course, the usage of multiple languages, speaking German and English, and I think that's a development that that is used very much now by Netflix, but really, I mean, at the core of the story, and it really brings us to a different kind of filmmaking where it's always more direct. I think this is an interesting moment as a filmmaker to be so free in terms of language as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, I have to say, I started a couple of years ago with Bad Banks. We did, in the world of investment banking, you change from one language to the other within one sentence. And since then, it's kind of, in Je suis Carl, my latest feature film, you have, I think, 4 different languages, and it's just, so I don't even realize that I'm working in different languages in one film.
It's interesting, at Netflix we've seen that more people watch subbed and dubbed programs than they do programs in original at this point. So it doesn't matter in the meantime, which is so exciting. I really believe that people do want to see stories in their own languages, in their native languages, based in their cultures. And to us, it's really important to be authentic. We didn't want to have British actors speaking English with a weird German accent or something like that. And it's bizarre how seamless it is. But I think today as well, English and German, I mean, English is not a problem for most of the youth anymore. And I love that this opens up this opportunity that you look at, like, even unorthodox in Yiddish, didn't bother anybody, au contraire, Oh, and fun fact, George Mackay learned German, which I think was amazing for his role. I suppose he's not fluent, but he did learn German.
Yeah, George Mackay is an amazing actor, and he trained really hard. There were more scenes where he speaks German, and we were all pretty impressed.
That is so interesting that you already talked about the languages and authenticity in a way as well. Let's talk a little bit about locations before we watch the next clip. Because I think, Andrew, you told us a very funny story in our talk before when you were like, well, you know, because we were thinking that this scene actually was set at a bar or a restaurant in Munich. And then you told us, no, 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 no. And then you came up with the story. The first scene was actually not shot in the UK, right? And it was not. So maybe you want to tell us this story, how it all happened and where you actually shot the scenes.
We had to shoot the first scene in Berlin, apart for reasons to do with the schedule and balancing the schedule. But yeah, so we were shooting that scene in November in Berlin, and it's meant to be Oxford in June. So there was a real danger. You could actually see the cold from people's breath. And we were filming till 2:00 in the morning. The best thing about the night was, because it went very well, we were lucky with the weather, but the band that was playing the live music, they wouldn't stop playing. We were having such an amazing time. They'd been playing for about 6 hours, and we were trying to get all the extras wrapped and get everyone to go home. And they just kept, we eventually had to jump in and tell them to shut up. But we had a lot of challenges between filming in Berlin and Munich, and then we came back to the UK, and we filmed Liverpool for London. So we did pretty much nothing in London at all. But we had a lot of fun going between Dresden and Munich and Berlin.
Yeah, so the scene in the bar, the one you just saw, we filmed in. I don't even think that it's called a Brauhaus. It's a restaurant in East Berlin in Köpenick. I think it was the first time that's been used as a film location. But of course, we turned it into something Bavarian, and I have a feeling it works out pretty well.
Well, you tricked us into it, definitely. Sasha, you
There are also some great locations in Munich, definitely. They did shoot here, and we all kind of geeked out on the Führerbau. That was incredibly important to have that authenticity, to be able to shoot there, and where the Musikhochschule is now. And I think that was really powerful for everyone to be able to do that.
Yeah, that was. I think we were desperate to get the opportunity to film there. Because so many, I mean, the exterior still looks like back then, and to be able to film the scene where the 4 leaders signed the Munich Treaty in the room where it actually happened, that was, of course, it was magical in a way, in a strange way, but because, you know, it's, I mean, I think it's a great thing that now this place is turned into something completely different, that arts took over that place, but I don't know if we're going to see something from, yeah, I guess so. No, coming here, being able to shoot was incredible, and we kind of everybody felt it on the days where we were filming it.
So let's roll the next clip, and let's see if we see more of the actors or more of Munich and the scope and how it's inside the film. Before jumping into the scope of the film, this was one more part showing us or expanding the universe of the actors and the roles. Now Sandra Hüller is playing as well, as you saw in Munich, and she's playing Helen Winter. And how is she complicating things? Would you like to explain something about the scene and her role in that specific moment? Because I mean, we jumped further, but we haven't told the audience about Helen Winter, so it would be nice if the director could say a few words regarding her role.
Yeah, she's an interesting character. She works at the Foreign Office, so this scene is set in 1938, so 6 years after the Oxford scene. And the second scene, Paul now works for the Foreign Office and is part of a secret clandestine group who works against Hitler. And so he's changed within the last years, and Helen Winter is a character who stands for all the women of resistance who have actually until now not really a name or a face, and there's a lot of research that there were quite not only a few women in the German resistance, yeah, so what she gives, she hands him a document that is like a protocol of it, and it's a document that exists where Hitler speaks out very clearly all his territorial demands in Europe, and that the German race needs to expand in order to get more living space, and so this is kind of a scene where they decide that Paul has to go to the Munich conference, or it's a bit earlier, but it's a scene that kind of helps setting up Paul's journey through the film.
The scene gives us the opportunity to talk about the casting, especially the German casting. So now, this being having your German film team and being with Turbine Studios, that's very interesting. How is the decision? How was the decision about the German actors actually made? It's all with your part, or is there something that's different if we work with Turbine Studios? Because I mean, Sandra Hüller is obviously very, very well known, but when it comes to other roles, for example, how it expanded, were the processes that were both in Germany about the decision of casting as well as in Britain?
Well, I think we started very early. You know, I always need to find the main cast, and I remember because I had just shot my other film with Jannis Niewöhner. So when we met in London, and it wasn't even clear that I would do the film. We spoke about Jannis.
Clear to me. Yeah.
Sorry?
It was clear to me you would do the film. But
okay. I didn't know. So I think we had a first conversation about Jannis, and because Sasha is based in Germany, of course she knows every German actor and actress. And then we started, you know, I think we offered to Jannis very early, and then with George Mackay, we had normal discussions about like who is there, who are we interested in. George was clearly one of the first ideas from our British casting director, so we were working with a British casting director and Anja Dierberg in Germany. It was like, you know, I usually need to build up the cast from the core, and so this is obviously the two guys. We were speaking about Jeremy Irons very early because Jeremy Irons, first of all, he looks very similar to Neville Chamberlain, has the right age, and he's best friend with Robert Harris, so he was kind of around the project. And then, I mean, we were lucky because of COVID. Some of the German cast, like Sandra or August Diehl, had other big projects that were cancelled or delayed, so they were available. But I wouldn't say, Andrew or Sasha, correct me, that we had different discussions. We wanted great actors for every little part.
Yeah, we all discussed every role, yeah. British or German.
I do think it's worth saying, I think it's a great compliment to Christian as a director, though, that people like Sandra and August wanted to do the film. because they're not, they're not the main parts, and they're such big stars in Germany. And I think they wanted to work with Christian. Although there was a nice moment for me when Jeremy was kind of hovering around the project, and he was head of the jury at the Berlinale back in February, and we hosted a lunch in Berlin, and Christian came as well, and I don't think we even had a script then, but the two of them went out to have a cigarette, and I could see them through the glass, standing outside, like hovering around each other, trying to work out whether they liked each other or not. Fortunately, it turned out that they did.
That is such a good story as well. I was going to ask, so are you sort of like implying that the pandemic sort of like played into your hands, because some actors or actresses were actually available, but how was it shooting and producing and developing this film in the pandemic with an international cast and an international crew in the shooting in the UK and in Germany?
I think we can give that one to Andrew.
I think it presented all kinds of different challenges that none of us had before. And we went through different lockdowns. And when we came to Germany in pre-production, Germany was coming out of its first lockdown, and suddenly life seemed much freer. But it in a strange way, I think the experience for all of us brought us all closer together. I think, working on a film is often a bit like an extended family, and quite often quite a dysfunctional family. But I think we all looked after each other more because there was a real concern about health and about the production. I think especially when we came to Munich, in Munich, we all had to, the lockdown came back again. So we all had to stay in the same hotel, and we all had to go down and eat at the same time together, like a family, every evening at the same time. And I think that experience, especially when we got to Munich, brought us all closer. And I'm sure in some way, definitely feed it into the film and into the connection that we all felt to each other.
Yeah, and in a funny way, the development process was a bit weird because I never met Ben Power in person. I think the first time I met Ben was in, Andrew, when did we go on Tech Recce's? Maybe in September, so a month before we started shooting, when we were actually in the UK. So we would do every conversation on Zoom. I mean, we at least had met once. So it's strange to talk about, making a film about two countries. And of course, back then, people, they wrote letters to each other. They didn't even have phones. So that was interesting and in a way magical how it all worked. And I think Netflix helped a lot to make, to say very early, we want to shoot and we want everybody to be safe. And we felt very safe. I mean, at the end, when you see the film, there was a big lockdown in the UK and later also in Munich when we were filming here. But because of everything, of all the security protocol, we did have a normal shooting. There was no scene that was not unshootable. So that was the big magic, because I think in June last year, we had no idea how this shoot is going to look like. And now it's a film that looks like a proper film and not like a compromise.
There was one very, very stressful evening, I don't know if you remember, Christian, in Munich, where I remember I got a message back that your test that day had been compromised in some way and that there was no clear result. And I had to call Christian and say, you can't leave your room, you have to stay in your room. And we all went downstairs and had dinner with Jeremy Irons. And then it took about 3 hours, I think, before we got the second result, which said it was just a mistake. It was all completely fine. I felt so bad because you were trapped upstairs having a nervous breakdown, thinking that was the end.
Yeah,
of the
because
movie.
I was wondering if Netflix or you, if there was like a plan B director somewhere lined up that you would call just now to take over in case it's a positive result. No, but yeah, it was odd, and we had that, of course, several times. Also with Frank, my DP, when we were shooting in the UK, there was a wrong test result, and that's like heart attack moments.
Now, we will see the scope of your film now, because this is actually scenes from Munich that were shot in Munich, parts of it at least. We can talk about that. And please roll the clip.
I think this is a beautiful scene where we can talk about like how you play with the indoors and the outdoors, because it's in one scene where you have like this very Kammerspiel, chamber piece-like atmosphere inside with the close-ups, and then the outside where it becomes more a thriller type of atmosphere where you can really feel that vibe and the energy of the political times that the film is set in. Maybe you can tell us a little about your how you approached this kind of like style and scope.
Generally, it was, there's been so many films and series about this time, and what I try to do is to have less iconic images that we've seen so many times with the big swastika flags, with marching dozens of soldiers. I wanted to try to give the film a feel like how it felt to live back then, when it was all normal. It was part of your everyday life. So the swastika flags are always somewhere in the background, out of focus. And the same with soldiers. There's another big scene shot in Berlin where you have a dialogue between two men, and there's SS officers just sitting there drinking beer in the background. So the horror of that time, I wanted to kind of bring under the surface. It's always there, but I didn't want to show all the time how dark and horrible it was, because funnily enough, when you watch old images of Munich or of Berlin, even the first month of the Second World War, people had a normal life. They were going to Freibad Wannsee. They would, the restaurants were full. The big boulevards were full of people. There were tourists. It's incredible how ordinary things still went, and people had, it was amazing to find people, to find photographs and video, film footage of people going to bars, to clubs, to dance. And of course, the deportation of Jews was happening at the same time. It was part of the everyday life. But Berlin was sunny in summer, and this is something I tried to approach. And of course, there are many elements in that story that you would call like a classical political thriller, but again, I tried throughout the whole film to keep it as a thriller within a normal, ordinary world.
If I can add, ordinary world makes it sound a little bit duller than it is. I think it's really what Christian has managed to do is create this sense of urgency throughout the entire film, of importance of not just the movement from place to place. That is, it's very dynamic. It's moving, it's urgent. The themes, the relationships, the emotions, the politics, it's all important at every moment. And those thriller elements really never leave you. Showing this ordinary life, you never forget those thriller elements.
Now, talking about Munich outside locations, one that was seen is as you said, the former Führerbau, the Musikhochschule, but the outside location that I'm talking about is the Odeonsplatz. And you said nothing was unshootable, but this is there's a difficulty to shoot the Odeonsplatz. It's always crowded. So what time of day is it, or was it breezy, COVID empty day, or how did you do it? How long did it take you to shoot the Odeonsplatz? Were there special precautions in COVID times? Please tell us a bit about this outside location shoot. And this is also going to Andrew, of course.
I mean, we were able to block the Odeonsplatz
easily.
I don't know.
It was
Andrew.
blocked.
I guess there was some.
Andrew's laughing.
Trouble.
Easy.
No, I have to say the city authorities were incredibly supportive and helpful. And I don't know whether when we did it, actually, the lockdown had got easier, so it was quite busy. But we had it for the whole day, so we were able to shoot from very early in the morning, and then we were able to shoot the nighttime scenes at the end of the day. But I think generally the city I don't know why, because I had never filmed in Munich before, so I have nothing to compare it to. But it was really incredible how much assistance we got and how much support. I think the trickiest location was the Führerbau, but that was more to do with the sensitivities around the music school and disruption of students' practice times, and also I think a lot about how do you deal with that history and that identity, and how do you represent it in such a way that is not a celebration but is a historic record of events. I think that was probably the most sensitive issue to do with the city and the music school.
And what was the key point in the decision making, Andrew? If you would expand, I mean, a personal talk with the director of the music.
I think
school.
It was. I think because initially there was a lot of reluctance. I think it was more a case of us presenting the case of why we wanted to do it, how we wanted to do it, what the script was, what the script was all about, and there was a practical side about not disrupting students and providing other ways for them to rehearse. But I think fundamentally it was really about, if you're going to come back to such a historic building and recreate events and hang swastikas outside, then you have to have a good reason for why you're doing it. And I think we worked really hard over quite a period of weeks and even months to make that argument and present it in a sensible way.
Yeah, and we got the help of Bettina Reitz. Thanks, Bettina, again. And I remember going there with a group of 20 people to really explain why we need to do it here and why we don't want to rebuild it elsewhere in a studio. It felt, what Sasha says is that the whole film has an urgency, and I think we could present that quite clearly. I think we ended up shooting 4 days there, and it was it was amazing, and it's the film would be different if we weren't allowed to do it.
Shall we watch the last clip?
So we have finally seen Neville Chamberlain, Jeremy Irons, and while Andrew before told us from his perspective about your meeting, I would like to have your perspective on the meeting with the Jeremy Irons back then in Berlin when you first met. How were your feelings? How were the discussions? What can you share?
Yeah, again, Andrew was hosting a lunch, and Jeremy was the president of the international jury of the festival, and he didn't show up. He was meant to show up, but then he never came, and I was almost about to leave when he arrived, and Andrew had already told him that I was there and that I'm most likely going to be the director of the film, and so... But again, we didn't have a script back then, and Jeremy already was kind of running the whole hotel, and he knew everyone, and so he took me to this kind of little balcony, so we had some privacy, and he was being really kind, and we talked about the novel, and you know, we both agreed, let's read a script, let's get on the phone, let's talk if we like the script or not, and talk more. And then he said, I think from what I see, you seem to be a good guy, and I said the same to him. And so we had another cigarette. I was very nervous, but then he was kind of, you know, when you meet Jeremy in private, he's very down to earth. He looks, the first time we met in London, he came by motorbike, and he wore a 40-year-old leather suit, and he's you know, as long as he has his cigarettes, he's very calm and very easy to talk to, and yeah, and we just kept talking. Once the script arrived, of course he has notes. He's someone who's done big roles, big international films, and he's very experienced. But it was most of the time very, very helpful what he brought into the script, and so it was, those discussions were not very difficult.
Now you talked about the resemblance, the right age. Neville Chamberlain, how is, together with Jeremy Irons, how did you look, both the book and now the film, how do they look at the historical figure of Neville Chamberlain? What's the offer the film has to give us here? Because as you said, or somebody said before, I mean, talking about Neville Chamberlain, younger people don't know him. So also in Britain. So here's an offer, and a new one, opening up a new discussion.
Yeah, it would be nice, Andrew, if you assist. Well, definitely Chamberlain has been seen as a weak character for a long time, because Churchill is the star of that era, because he led Britain to war and helped winning the war. So from my research, Chamberlain is kind of a forgotten and a tragic hero. I mean, at this very moment of history, he was incredibly popular because the whole world was celebrating him, but it didn't take for very long. But I think what Robert Harris tried is to bring in a new perspective on this historical character, because he so much believed in not going to war immediately. He bought Britain and the allies of Britain extra time to get armed to actually win the war later. So this is kind of the new angle from the book, and I think it's quite interesting because it's hard for me or for us to judge whether this is right or wrong, but it's one new perspective, yeah, a perspective that I find interesting to discuss, even in such a toxic time like 38. Like, what are the right methods to stand up against a man like Adolf Hitler? So I think Robert Harris has a clear opinion on that as a historian, but it's more what I found, or what we found more interesting, is the general discussion about what, because it's so easy to say they should have stopped him way earlier. Andrew.
Yeah, I think that's very much the premise of Robert's book, is to try and reassess Chamberlain's role. And, you know, we've become so used in Britain to the story that Churchill was the great hero, as Christian said. And now people are revising that and actually looking at some of the other things that Churchill did. He was actually a racist and behaved very badly in international history with India and other places. And I think with Chamberlain, the main message, I think, could be seen as an incredible act of bravery to effectively sacrifice your role in history and your memory in order to try and achieve appeasement and try and delay the war. And I think that was what we were trying to explore, what Robert was trying to explore. And I think Jeremy was Jeremy's one of those actors that you kind of dream about working with at some point in your life, you know, that very experienced, done so many films, won so many awards, and is very, very eccentric, calls everyone darling without hesitation. And he was perfect to capture all the complexities of Chamberlain.
I think this is a great ending to our panel discussion, because time sort of flew by and we already have to stop discussing, whereas we could, I think, speak forever, talk forever, but we want to see the whole thing soon.
When?
I would say. When?
Tell us more.
I don't know yet. We're still looking for the best spot. Not sure yet.
Okay. So we've seen great parts, and I think it's really been a pleasure to be connected digitally also to Britain. Thank you so much, Andrew Eaton. Thank you so much, Sasha Bühler, and thank you so much, Christian Schwochow.
Dankeschön.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.